Hey there, I'm Melissa May Younger, and I wanted to read you the first chapter of my new book, The Land in the Woods, to see if you would be interested in possibly reading this book on your own or with your children. So I'll read the prologue and chapter 1. I met the Wells children one evening while I was sitting in my rocking chair on my porch. I'm sure the children thought I was a lonely old lady and felt sorry for me. I was surprised when they walked onto my porch, as I wasn't expecting visitors. The children said hello, and we talked a while about where they lived and went to school. My children had all grown up and left home long ago, so I was grateful for the company. It was a very ordinary conversation until the youngest, Bobby, whispered, "We just came back from the most amazing place." I thought they had gone on vacation somewhere, but the oldest, Janine, shushed him so quickly that I wanted to hear more. "We found a magical land," Maurie, the middle child, informed me. "Have a seat," I offered. "Let me get you some lemonade." As I listened to the children's stories, I realized that my 3 new friends had discovered wonderful and terrible things. Their story was so fantastic that I longed to go to the land they described. From that day, the Wells children returned to visit me many times. Each time, they told me another exciting adventure, one of which I will share with you here. Chapter 1, Canoe Making. The midday sun beat down on the 3 Wells children through the treetops. It was another lazy summer day in the Vermont woods, heavy with pollen and buzzing honeybees. The 10-year-old Janine lay with her dark hair in a tangled mess around her pale face. She had closed her eyes and looked like she was asleep. The younger girl, Maurie, lay on her back, staring up at the trees. She imagined the branches were long, skinny fingers trying to claw at the sky. Her heart raced as she wondered what might happen if the trees turned into wicked monsters and chased them. Out of the corner of her eye, Maurie saw Bobby sitting nearby, plucking at the grass. His light brown hair was tousled and long, nearly reaching his blue puppy dog eyes. Maurie brushed some blonde hair out of her green eyes as she contemplated their dilemma. She sat up, a solution to her imaginary problem taking shape. "I wonder," she began, "if we found a big tree." "What?" Janine asked, opening her eyes. "If we could make a canoe," Maurie finished, lost in her imagination for a moment. She frowned at the limited selection of trees around them. They would have to find a bigger tree for her plan to work. Bobby jumped up, grinning excitedly. "Yes," he exclaimed, "and we can hunt the wild beasts." Bobby grabbed a nearby branch and swung it as if it were Excalibur. Maurie laughed. "Bobby has such an imagination," she remarked, using the same tone her mother did. "We would need tools," Janine objected, sitting up. Maurie rolled her eyes. Janine was always shooting down her ideas before she had a chance to try them. Maurie placed her hands on her hips and stared at Janine, a fierce stubbornness rising within her. "We'll have to do it the way the Native Americans did," she declared. "We'll burn out the center." Maurie had read about canoe making in a textbook and thought it sounded fun. "A beaver could chew out the inside," Bobby suggested. He had stopped slashing the air with the tree branch and was looking at the trees around him. "Mom told us not to use fire," Janine warned, standing up. She dusted herself off and gave Maurie a meaningful look. "She said that to you and Bobby," Maurie retorted, raising her voice. "I can use it. I'm 8 now." Maurie bent down and opened her backpack on the ground. She rifled through it, taking out all the supplies they had packed. A Swiss Army knife, a canteen, a map of Cape Cod, although they were deep in the woods of Vermont, some crumpled newspaper, several granola bars, and a few plastic soldiers that Bobby had insisted they needed. At the bottom of the bag, she found a small box of matches. Maurie retrieved the matches, and Janine quickly snatched them from her hand. Maurie's mouth hung open. She hated when Janine grabbed things out of her hands. Janine held the matches in front of her, raising one eyebrow at Maurie. "No fire," Janine commanded. Maurie clenched her fist. Janine was taunting her. She always seemed to spoil Maurie's fun. Bobby looked from one girl to the other. "I'll carry the matches," he offered. The two girls stared at each other. Maurie tried to resist the urge to tackle Janine and steal the matches back. She started to count to 10 to calm herself down as her mother had taught her. Janine smirked, picked up Maurie's backpack, and slung it on her shoulder. "Why are you so mean?" Maurie asked. She glanced at the backpack, wishing Janine would give it back. Janine ignored Maurie and turned to Bobby. "You can't use the matches either," she scolded. "You might light the forest on fire." "You're not the boss of us," Maurie shouted. Anger rose within her, and she shoved Janine. Janine shoved back, and Maurie fell to the ground. "Hey," Maurie complained. She glared daggers at Janine. "Don't fight," Bobby pleaded in his baby voice, sitting on the ground. "Mom says we shouldn't fight." Maurie stood up and dusted herself off. "Fine, carry the matches, but when we find a tree, we all use them." "I can carry the matches. I'm very careful," Bobby pleaded, reaching out his hand. Janine pushed Bobby's hand away. "No." Maurie stepped towards Janine, ready to defend her younger brother. "Don't hit him." Bobby looked at the ground. "Humph," he said, stomping his foot and frowning. Janine slung the backpack over her shoulder. "Let's go," she said. Maurie and Bobby obediently fell into line behind her. Maurie watched the back of Janine's head, wishing Janine would trip over a root. Instead, Janine started humming softly, and Maurie rolled her eyes. The three children walked silently beside the bubbling brook. They walked further into the woods, and the thick foliage overhead began to block out the sunlight. Bobby slipped his small hand into Maurie's. It felt cold, and she knew he must be afraid. Her visions of the trees becoming wicked creatures returned to her. "Where are we?" Maurie asked, a slight tremor in her voice. "We're already deep in the woods." Janine spun around. "I have to find a fallen tree," she snapped. "Remember? It was your idea." "I'm scared," whimpered Bobby. He stuck his thumb in his mouth and scooted closer to Maurie. Maurie considered turning back, but Janine was right. It was her idea to make a canoe, and she wanted to see if it would work. "Don't worry, Bobby. We're safe," Maurie whispered, hugging him. "We're going to look out for you, or at least I will," she said loudly, hoping her comment would hurt Janine. "It won't be much longer," Janine promised. Janine stuck an accusatory finger in Maurie's face. "And I'm always looking out for you, too. Why do you think I'm in the woods with you?" The three children resumed their walk in silence. They were now deep in the woods, and the trees were much thicker. Janine pulled up short at a fallen oak tree. "This is perfect," she announced, touching the bark. Maurie went closer to get a better look. Judging by its condition, the tree had fallen recently. It had a sizable trunk, and its branches bore fresh green leaves. All three children were puzzling over the tree when a loud, high-pitched wail pierced the air, coming from the creek. Maurie watched the blood drain from her siblings' faces. Janine walked towards the place the sound had come from, and Maurie reluctantly followed with Bobby. The trees thinned until they all stood on the bank of the brook. "It must have been an animal," Janine guessed, scanning the brook. "It sounded more like a giant bird," Maurie observed, looking at the tops of the trees. She felt she was a more reliable expert on nature than Janine, who preferred to be indoors. "It was one of the wild beasts," Bobby whispered, backing away from the bank. His face was as white as marble. No animal, bird, nor wild beast appeared, and Maurie began to wonder if they had imagined it. Maurie and Janine went back into the woods to inspect the fallen tree and see if they could make it into a canoe. Maurie assumed Bobby was right behind them, but soon realized he wasn't. And that's where I will end. It's not the ending of chapter 1. But that's where I'll leave you hanging. And if you would like to read this story or read it to your children, you can find it on Amazon. And again, the name of the book is The Land in the Woods, and I'm Melissa May Younger. Thanks for listening. Bye.